Hey, so different video today. Today's video is going to be a list of all the things that are wrong with South Africa. South Africans are very positive people, but there's a lot of things going wrong with the country, and sometimes it's nice to have a detailed list of all the doom and gloom and economic and political issues that we have in the country. I'll also try to suggest some solutions to these problems, even though they might be a bit naive or intangible. It's good to think about how to solve our problems. In particular, I was reading the Financial Mail the other day, and so I'm going to quote some articles and some extracts from there, which really got me thinking the past couple of days. And this video is completely biased, unlike my elections video, where I ignored some of the political parties' woeful shortcomings, but I think it's important to talk about the real things that are wrong with the country and that. So yeah, here is everything that's wrong with South Africa. So the first and most recent calamity that the country's been facing is load shedding, yet again. Load shedding is when Eskom doesn't have enough electricity generation capacity to provide everyone in the country with electricity at the same time, so they cut off certain parts of the country to conserve energy and to prevent a national grid shutdown. Now, load shedding is good because it's planned, and if we have a national grid shutdown like Canada and parts of the States did in 2003, it can take like months to get everyone back online because you have to slowly start up a small generator, and then a bigger generator, and then a bigger generator, then a power plant and that. And the way our people at Eskom seem to work, that will take months. And the most dangerous part with not having electricity is not being able to watch Netflix at night, but sanitation. All the water pumps and sewers and water supply systems obviously have to be pumped using electricity. And if there's no water and no sanitation, it's kind of a big fucking problem. Like, I don't know if you've ever stayed in a house with no water for 2 days, because like toilets get a bit nasty. And so you can kind of imagine what would happen without sanitation for a couple of days or weeks. Load shedding is such a fundamentally problematic thing in the country right now, because without electricity your economy can't run. You can't run businesses and provide services and manufacture goods without electricity. And every time load shedding happens, the South African stock price, the JSE, drops by a couple of percentage points. It's very frustrating for businesses in that as well, because they don't know when load shedding is happening. The only reason we're not having load shedding right now in the December holidays is because there's no heavy industry happening right now. On the 5th of January, when heavy industry starts up again, we're going to have power interruptions because nothing has been done to remedy the problem, I promise you. And so what needs to be done to fix load shedding? Well, we need to stop doing this thing where, no, we've sorted the problem, no load shedding this month, and then boom, we go straight to stage 6 when we have to shed 6,000 megawatts off the national grid capacity in a single evening. That was a rough beginning of the December holidays. And so what we need to do, I read an article the other day that suggested we have stage half load shedding for the next year. So every day at 6 o'clock the power goes out for an hour. And if that you know the power is going out, you can plan your day around it, you can plan your evening around it, and it just requires some strength from our political leaders to say, okay, we're going to have load shedding every single day, it's not going to be lacquer, but this will give us time to take some of those older units off at Medupi Power Station and Khaleesi Power Station and repair them and fix them, because that's why we keep on having load shedding, because things break, because everything is running flat out trying to maintain the electricity the country is using, and nothing ever gets repaired, and so we have, boom, stage 6 load shedding. So if we just have load shedding every single day, people will get used to it, people will plan varsity, work, home life around it, and that'll really help just to give Eskom a break and to help them fix some of our aging power infrastructure. And then also what we need to do is we obviously need to build some nuclear power stations. We've been fucking around with those coal power stations like Medupi for over a decade now, billions of rands wasted, the things still don't manufacture electricity properly. I go on about nuclear because I attended a lecture by one of the professors in the electrical engineering department a while ago on campus, and he was going on about how nuclear is the only viable way to fix South Africa's problem because we need base load power. At night and during the day, you need a core, huge amount of electricity that the country can use and that is stable. Renewables are unfortunately also very expensive and unstable. Obviously, when the sun doesn't shine, you can store it using battery power and that, but nuclear energy is just so damn efficient compared to renewables and coal power. A tiny block of plutonium like this can run a submarine for 100 years. Renewable energy can't solve South Africa's electricity problem right now, because as nice as it is to think about climate change and to think about saving the planet and that, renewable energy is expensive and it's not the most efficient. The amount of sun that hits a solar panel that's converted into electricity is only about 20%. It's inefficient and it's expensive, whereas nuclear energy is extremely efficient. The US used 60% fossil fuels and 20% nuclear in 2018 and 20% renewables, but they're a big country with money for expensive renewable projects. The same, Norway uses almost completely hydroelectric power, but they're one of the wealthiest and most first world countries in the world without other pressing political and economic problems, so they can spend time and money and expertise on building renewable big energy projects. And so nuclear really does seem the only way to go here because we've had such a disastrous record with our coal power stations as well. In particular, we need to get French, Israeli, and whichever other private companies manufacture nuclear plants to tender for a nuclear plant or a couple of nuclear plants in South Africa, unlike the expensive 111 billion rand nuclear energy project that Zuma and his cronies were trying to get together with the Russians, which was just an excuse for them to put money in their back pockets. We need to have private tenders, we build these power stations, and it'll really give South Africa a break with its energy concerns. And yeah, it's been really frustrating recently with load shedding and that, and it's on everyone's minds every time it happens. It's very frustrating and it's not good for the economy. And so that's the first thing that's wrong with South Africa. The next thing that's wrong with South Africa is that the economy shrunk 0.6% in the last quarter. That means the size of all the goods and services, the value of all the goods and services produced by the country decreased by 0.6% in the last 3 months. That is as opposed to China's 6% growth rate, which is insane, and which is what we need to be fixing our country. This means that businesses are closing, less products and services are being produced, there's less foreign investment, and there are fewer jobs being created. This is due in no small part due to shortage of skilled workers, lack of economic policies and incentives by government, and just a general sense of decline in the country. No one wants to invest in the country if your GDP and that is on a negative downhill spiral. Equally, no one wants to start a business here when there are policies like BEE, unions giving trouble, and the threat of land expropriation that will derail a newly founded business, and then makes it really difficult for anyone in the country to start up a new business and to start, producing and contributing to the economy. We're due for a ratings downgrade, definitely. I think it's in March or sometime in the new year, where Moody's, the financial institution, will downgrade us to junk status, which means that there's no confidence in South Africa and our ability to give returns on investments. So this will mean that higher taxes will be implemented so that South Africa can service their higher debts to all the money that we've borrowed from overseas institutions like the World Bank and that. There will be less government spending, a weaker currency, more expensive goods and services, and as much as $10 billion of money flowing out of the country. It's not good news. We'll definitely go into a recession. Technically, we're already in one at the moment. And our debt to GDP ratio is at 60%. This means that all of the debt that we owe to other institutions and to other countries stands at 60% of our gross domestic product at the moment. That's a lot of money that we owe people that we can't even spend on ourselves. So yeah, some ideas, some immediate action plans for the government to solve these economic woes are to encourage investment by dealing with the electricity issue immediately, taking a strong stand against unnecessary labor disputes with the unions, get in some Margaret Thatcher vibes in there. Stop any ideas of nationalizing the reserve bank so people can steal from it. A lot of our champagne socialists want to nationalize a lot of industries when they've proven that they don't have the competency to do so. So as my dad always says, government just needs to get out of the way of private industry and provide infrastructure, provide roads, power, education, and uphold the law. Leave the private industry and competition to private companies and that, because they've shown that they have the competency to do so. Look at SAA, what a disaster. Just need to take some responsibility and really provide some economic growth. We always hear our politicians and people on the radio and people at press conferences saying, we need to encourage economic growth by providing a suitable environment for businesses and that to grow and to thrive in that. All of that is just political nonsense. You need to make it easier and cheaper for people to start businesses, and you need to make it easier for companies and for investors to keep their money in South Africa and to have control over those investments so that they can grow those businesses and provide jobs and provide money and provide taxes to the country. So the next problem I'm going to talk about is SAA and all of the corruption there and all the money lost there. SAA lost 10.4 billion rand in the last 2 years because of mismanagement, corruption, overstaffed planes and check-in counters, inefficient government bailouts, and weak leadership. Oh my god, 10 billion rand. It's a lot of zeros. Any private company would have long ago been liquidated because that's basically insolvency. South African Airlines has lost money for the last 10 years. I don't think they've made a profit since 2011. And that means government has been bailing them out with taxpayer money for the last 9 years. And it's unfortunately the taxpayer, you and me, that pays for SAA to continue running itself into the ground. SAA has just been placed in business rescue now, which is another way of the government obviating responsibility and delaying the inevitable demise of an institution that obviously shows it doesn't know how to manage its money, and it is not efficiently run because it's been on financial aid from the government for the last 9 years, meaning it's been buggering around for 9 years. I don't know where all that money goes, I can't fathom how much 10.4 billion rand is and where that goes. Obviously airlines are expensive businesses, but I don't know how many corrupt ministers in that were involved in SAA and the corruption scandals that have been going on there. And just inefficiency, really, spending that amount of money on a failing airline that won't be missed, by the way. Our government ministers are always on about how SAA is, a lifeblood for bringing people into South Africa. I don't know if you've ever looked at Flight Radar 24, but there's about 20 other airlines that fly into South Africa daily from places like Shenzhen, China, and Istanbul, and New York, and London Heathrow. South African Airlines won't be missed. Those other carriers that are profitable will just put another plane on the route and will service South Africa more. It's just frustrating to see so much money going down the drain for no other reason than ego. We need to have a national carrier. No, we don't. Now, obviously, the job losses when SAA eventually goes under will hurt, and it is, unfortunately, the average person working in SAA that will feel the brunt of SAA collapsing. And it's very sad that this will happen, but it's not an excuse to keep the airline open. I'd argue that the money, 10.4 billion rand that taxpayers have to fork out to keep SAA alive, is a lot more harmful than the couple 100,000 people that will lose their jobs when SAA eventually goes under. On the topic of jobs, the next thing that's wrong with South Africa is that unemployment is at 29%. The actual statistic is 38.5% if we include people not still looking for work. That means they've given up. Nearly half the country is not working. That's a massive problem. Only 6.4 million tax returns are submitted every year, so there's only 6.4 million people supporting South Africa's 56 million population. Nearly half the country is not working, and it's being supported by a tiny sliver of... If that's not an omen of this video, I don't know what is. So the maths doesn't add up. The majority of the population is unskilled and doesn't have any opportunities and is being supported by the minority. This is really not great. So what can we do about it, Government always goes on about how we need more vocational colleges and trade skills, we need better education. Less often they mention that we need less union disputes because companies won't hire or open branches in South Africa if you can't manage your own staff and if there's the constant threat of your workers not showing up for work because of higher wage demands. And it's unfortunately, government always goes on about how we might need to create jobs, but jobs are useless if they serve no other purpose but to be a job. Jobs need to benefit society by building, maintaining, and fixing stuff. Here's an idea off the top of my head. Take all the money you were going to put into SAA next year, probably billions of rands. Shut that bugger down and build RDP houses. Hire builders, train people to become builders, and build those houses. We have a housing crisis in the country, informal settlements and that. Lots of people don't have access to running water and electricity because they're living in shacks, which is a terrible lifestyle for them. And so build RDP houses, employ people to build those houses, and drive some money back into the country instead of into the ground into a financially insolvent airline. Win-win, and I thought of that in 1 minute. I'm sure the government ministers could do better. Next up is education. The WEF's 2014 Global Information Technology Report ranks South Africa 146th for the overall quality of its education. The matric pass rate is purported to be 70.7%, but it's actually around 43.7% because of all the people, 500,000 or more, that have dropped out of school since grade 1. So it's great if the people who are enrolled in matric pass, but what about all the hundreds of thousands of people that got left behind before they even made it to the end of matric? Those people don't even have a high school education. And if you know anything about the job market, it's extremely difficult to get a decent paying job without at least a university education, never mind not a high school education. And so without educating our people, we're not giving them any opportunities at all in the world. The Southern and Eastern African Consortium for Monitoring Education Quality found in a 2014 study that 60% of maths teachers in South Africa that are educating people from grade 1 to grade 6 failed to pass the maths tests for that same grade when they had to take them. That means our teachers are unqualified and don't know what they're doing. And while I'm sure it's extremely difficult with the resources allocated to you and the kind of intense conditions that people face in teaching, it's extremely difficult to teach. That's unacceptable. I don't want to say too much about here because we have unqualified teachers, overcrowded, an expensive school, overcrowded and inefficient schools, varsities that are extremely competitive and expensive. I don't have much to say really because I don't have many solutions, and I went to a private school. I was very privileged and lucky to go to one. But I don't know, ideas off the top of my head, more teacher training colleges, better management of funds, bit more political accountability to educators, putting qualified people in departments, less corruption, proper textbook and resource allocation, teachers who show up to class, going back to the power of unions and striking teachers and that, just not showing up for work. Teacher absenteeism is a real problem in the country as well. I don't have a lot of ideas because it's a very difficult and complicated solution, but I don't know, perhaps just people who are qualified in the departments to actually lead teachers and to put in a good education plan would be a good idea. And then the kind of pervasive nature of the country that we have with crime, gender-based violence, rape, all of the bad and terrible criminal activities that come from a society of disenfranchised people without jobs and social services, with income inequality, and like a government that doesn't seem to really care about crime. Police seem to do little to prevent crime, and criminals get away with whatever they want, whether it be taxis breaking road rules, corruption at the highest levels of government, fraud, and extreme violent crime that seems to go unpunished all around major cities and that. I mean, it comes from a patriarchal society that has defined its morals in a really great constitution in 1994, but has never really been big on enforcing them. Culturally, women aren't seen as equal a lot of the time in the country, as was seen by the horrendous spat of gender-based violence and huge protests that we had on varsity campuses and that in the past couple of months. That's something that needs to be dealt with by governments. The solution is really to train police officers better, to enact something similar to New York's broken window policy, where if a broken window is present at the front of a building, you fix that window. If there's graffiti on a train, you don't let that train go out until you fix the graffiti. Upholding the smallest of laws to make sure that people say, oh, we're a law-abiding country now, the police do care that we follow the rules and that breaking laws won't be tolerated, and so we won't commit these bigger and bigger, more horrendous crimes that people do commit when they see that no one is enforcing the actual law of the country. And so, it's a very difficult thing to get right, but to hold everyone accountable, no matter their political affiliation, and just to uphold the law. We have a great constitution that was set out in 1994, one of the best in the world, actually, and we don't seem to enforce it. And obviously this is a very difficult thing to get right, but it's important, and so that's why I'm mentioning it here. And finally, we get to the lack of political direction, strength, and competency in the country. They say it always starts at the top, and indeed it's true. When your leaders aren't following the rules and aren't doing anything to help the country, why should anyone else? We always have corruption scandals, mismanagement, waste, infighting. I don't want to say too much here for fear of everyone getting feisty about their specific political parties. But needless to say, ANC has stuffed up a lot of the country recently with corruption, infighting, and wasteful expenditure, and unqualified people in positions of power. The EFF's fascist, socialist, and at times racist approach to politics is not an efficient way of running a government in 2019 and now almost 2020. And the DA's recent implosion, lack of direction, infighting, and at times wandering ideology leaves little choice for the average South African when it comes to voting. President Ramaphosa seems to be hamstrung by his own party at the moment and doesn't seem to be really doing a lot in the country. He's made some nice big empty promises that seem to have done nothing, which is come on, every politician does that, but it's unfortunate that after so much hype about Ramaphosa's new dawn of the ANC, not much has happened in the country recently. And it just comes back to the average South African saying, oh well, politicians don't care about us. This country's stuffed, it's useless, let me just immigrate. which is a terrible attitude to have, but I mean, you have to look after yourself after a point, and so it's just really frustrating. What can be done? Well, you know, all the usual things: greater political accountability, a return perhaps to the morals of the Constitution that we set out so long ago, solid and fair economic plans to address the inequalities of the country and the need for desperate economic growth. Yeah, it all just sounds like vague political platitudes, but I guess things like job programs, making less massive political promises, and actually hiring and appointing educated, skilled people to government positions might help a lot. I don't know, I'm just a teenager talking his ass off on the internet. And all of these things are hard to get right, and even harder to do all at the same time. But we can't just say that we're a third world African country, that we can't do the same things that the first world countries do because we don't have money and because we're a third world country, with the legacy of things like apartheid and terrible inequality and terrible violent history in the country. But it's important to say, no, we have high standards. We as a nation want to keep those standards high, and we want to remind the people in government that are supposed to be representing us what they are supposed to be striving for, and that it's important that we talk about all of the things wrong in the country, and we lay out things that we're not happy with. And so we lay out all these problems and we give some solutions so that the people in charge of the country can perhaps act on them like they're supposed to be doing. You know, it's important to strive for your ideals. So thank you for watching. I really am a positive person, despite what you may think after watching this maybe 20-minute, I don't know, 29, however long video about all of the things wrong in the country. But it's just really frustrating to see so many broken things around you. I'm a very positive person, and as a general whole, humanity is getting better and life is the best it's ever been, but there are still lots of things to fix, especially in our country. So yeah, it's obviously very difficult and a complicated problem caused by a century of discrimination, apartheid, and the terrible things that happened under it, and now a corrupt government that seems to have done very little to help the people they promised the world to in 1994. So it's a complicated problem with no easy fixes, but there are many things, so many things that we could do as a country to fix things. But it just requires, as Magda Sky wrote in a Financial Mail article a while ago, it just requires some testicular fortitude from the people in charge to do what is necessary to fix things. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that your holiday has been great and that 2020 is a great year for you and our country. Just get ready to have some load shedding, get those candles out for January 5th when heavy industry goes back and the power grid implodes once again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video for probably a more light-hearted, fun, happy, positive, optimistic video. Because while it's important to see all the things that are wrong with the country, you got to have faith and optimism too. Thanks, Cheers.